How to buy a cheap hurricane damaged catamaran. After Hurricane Beryl, I bought a hurricane damaged catamaran and now I'm cruising the Caribbean on a new boat. I've gotten hundreds of people asking me to help finding a hurricane damaged boat, mostly catamaran, or simply just questions about how to buy a hurricane damaged sailboat. And today I'm going to tell you everything that I have learned in the hope that some cruisers out there can benefit from that. If a salvage company buys the boat you want before you, and then if you were to buy that boat from the salvage company the day after they bought it, the price of the boat goes between 3 to 4 times up for you to buy it. So the goal of this video is to explain to you how it all works and how you can buy a boat for the price that the salvage company would pay for a boat. That is the bottom price that any boat gets sold for. So let me first tell you how I bought my hurricane damaged catamaran, and after that talk about my experience of what was paid for hurricane damaged catamarans around me in the 4 months that I was there. I was there from about a week after the hurricane happened. So first, how did I buy my boat? So the hurricane just happened, and you have to imagine, like, electricity is gone, there's no internet, and no one knows what exactly is going on. So besides a few pictures, there was barely any information about how bad it was. Like, no one knew what was going on, and no one knew what was going to happen now. Are you allowed to go to the hurricane zone or not? No one knew. I was in Trinidad on my previous boat, and there was a boat owner who was making pictures for other boat owners and sent that on Facebook to show them how much damage their boat had. And he was able to do that because one of the neighbor boats had Starlink. So I sent him a message like, hey, is there anything I can do to help over there? And if you hear of anybody who wants to sell his catamaran, let me know. And then actually he wanted to sell his catamaran, and from then everything just went really fast. Like, I sailed there, but I made a stop in Grenada, the main island, because I was, you couldn't check in Carriacou. So I made a stop in Grenada main island, checked in, and continued to Carriacou. I saw the boat the day after, and then also I walked around the yard to see all the other destroyed boats, because I had no idea what was going to happen. Will better boats be for sale, and will they go for $1, $10,000, $50,000? I had no idea, So I made a decision, not knowing whether it was going to be the right decision, but I feared if I didn't make a decision now, that maybe nothing else would come up. Like, I didn't know, So I bought the boat. I arrived in Carriacou 7 to 8 days after Hurricane Beryl. Around that time I arrived, the salvage company had already bought their first boat. I won't mention their name. So for a long time it was very confusing to me, because they stated to me the salvage company doesn't buy and sell boats, but yet every catamaran owner who sold their boats through insurance told me they sold it to that salvage company. So it was very confusing. But it turned out, actually, the people that came in, there were people freelancing for the salvage company, but they had a side business of buying and selling boats, which is actually incredibly smart, because after a hurricane just happened, you often cannot just go to this affected area unless you have a real reason to go there. So I, for an example, had a permission letter from the previous owner of this boat. Eventually nobody asked me for it, but then again I arrived by sailboat, which might be easier than arriving by plane or by ferry. In this video I'm only talking about boats that were damaged in the boat yard, because later when we talk about repair prices, a boat that sunk and those engines and all wiring have been underwater has a whole different price of recovery than one that was just damaged without saltwater intrusion. So first of all, everyone wanted a catamaran. In the beginning, basically no one was looking for a monohull. If you're happy with buying an old monohull, there's no rush. But if you want to buy a catamaran or a less than 10-year-old monohull, you better jump on that immediately. I've had multiple people at a certain point offering me $5,000 to find a deal on a catamaran. That's how bad people wanted hurricane damaged catamarans. So before continuing, I'm gonna already now tell you the conclusion of this video. The mistake that everybody was making in order to get a cheap catamaran or newer monohull of your dreams. Like if you're serious about buying a hurricane damaged catamaran, you need, number one, be in the affected area in less than a week after a hurricane happens, preferably maximum a few days after. Number two, you need about $35,000 ready to spend. Number three, you need to be able to stay about 1 to maximum 2 months in that area looking. And if you can do all these three things, the chance that you own a catamaran after that month is very big. Now let me explain why these are the three things you need to do or have if you are serious about buying a cheap boat. Hurricane damaged catamarans got sold for 10 to 20% of their current selling value. So if a catamaran had a selling value of about $300,000 it would now be sold between $30,000 and $60,000. Now you might think that his lower $30,000 would have less damage than the upper $60,000, but that's actually not true. The boats that were sold through the insurance would go for the lower range, and the people who had no insurance and were in a bigger rush would also go in the lower range. But the people who would take the time to wait a few months, and the people who bought their boat back from the insurance, that's something you can do, what I'll talk about later, and then would wait with selling, they would eventually go in the upper range towards the 20% of selling value, which doesn't sound like a lot right now, a few percent more, but if a boat has a selling value of 500,000 and 10% is 50,000 and 20% is 100,000, so it's still quite a difference. The damage would actually really not matter that much for the price. One keel broken, bulkhead damage, everything that was fixable within reason would be sold for 10 to 20% of the selling value. And if a boat was totally destroyed, there was a 38-foot catamaran, mast broken, both keels broken, all bulkheads broken, whole boat broken, like I would not have wanted it even if I'd gotten it for free. So then that was sold for 5% of the selling value, which came to $10,000 US. Still like good engines and stuff. Some examples of boats sold with damage that was fixable in reason. A 20-year-old 44-foot catamaran of one of the famous catamaran brands with at least one broken keel and a broken mast, and maybe some bulkhead issues, was sold through insurance for around $25,000 US. In good condition, I found them online for $250,000. A 43-foot catamaran of about 20 years old with a broken keel and a bent rudder and a broken mast, but including dinghy and new outboard, was sold for about $38,000 US. This boat had a market value of about $250,000, maybe a little more. The reason this boat was sold for a little more than the previous one is because the owner had bought the boat back from the insurance, which I'll explain later, and he came to the yard to try to get a bit more money than the insurance would have sold the boat for. Fun fact, he spent about a week in the yard trying to sell his catamaran, but there really was no one besides me physically there to look for boats. Eventually it was still sold to a salvage company who later sold it for a multiple of this. Now let me give you some other real examples. A 40-foot catamaran from 2019 with a selling value of $300,000 to $350,000 depending on the condition, also from one of the famous brands with at least one broken keel and a broken mast, was sold for around $50,000 US by the insurance company. So for about 15 to 17%. But in all honesty, this last boat he would have never been able to get. I had a long talk with the owners and they were really well insured and apparently were walking away with a price from the insurance that they thought they would have gotten to if they would have just, sold the boat in a good condition on the market. They seem to have no interest in spending time to try to get $20,000 to $30,000 US more. They were satisfied and wanted to move on with their life. Honestly, the people who either were not insured or were underinsured were the ones trying hardest to get a bit more money out of it. But of course, that is something you will never know. You do have to keep in mind that if a salvage company officially has taken over the yard, meaning they are the ones putting the boats that fell off their stands back up, they can charge up to $15,000 US to do that. The only thing that I've seen happening in this specific situation is that the people, mostly uninsured people, were patient and basically said, do not touch my boat. Eventually, a way came up to put the boat cheaper on stands, but then you might have to wait more than a month for that. But I can of course not guarantee that this will be the same way after the next hurricane somewhere else. Grenada consists out of 3 islands, Grenada Main Island, Ronda Island and Kirikou, and many specific things that one might need, like a generator, like I had, need to come on a ferry from Grenada Main Island to Kirikou. So it is likely that it is easier to find a cheap hurricane damaged catamaran in a tough location, in a little tougher location like this, than it would be if it happens in the future in a location where amenities are a bit easier. All of the above deals happened like super fast within the first month, probably faster. Later on, a 42-foot catamaran, only a couple years old, with a selling value of $400,000 to $500,000, was sold for more than $100,000, which is 20 to 25% of the selling value. Was it worth more than the other boats? Probably not, but these people had waited, and by the time they were selling the boat, they had 3 people interested in the boat, probably because they felt more secure now. They had actually bought back the boat from the insurance, and this way they ended up getting a lot more money for it. They had waited it all out and not in a rush sold the boat immediately. I would say a situation like this is all about a 2-month patience and waiting game. After that, actually 2.5 months later, Kirikou just like fully opened again for tourists. Everything then slowly seemed to go back pretty much to normal. There were boats that were insured and there were boats that were not insured. So how does insurance actually work? After the hurricane, some boats were declared a total loss, which apparently wasn't only always because the boat was a total loss, but also because repairing a boat in a location like Kirikou by experts, something that an insurance company would require, is a lot more difficult than in some of the in a big country or some of the other islands. If the boat was declared a total loss by the insurance company, then a salvage company can do an offer on that boat. So what it seems, and I can be wrong about this, is that there really only was one salvage company for like the first 2 months who was there and would make an offer. So let's say that they offer $25,000 for a boat with a selling value of $250,000, but of course damaged by the hurricane. Then the boat owner has the option to either agree, meaning if his insurance payout, for an example, would be $200,000 and he agrees, that's what he gets. Or he can buy the boat back himself for that amount of money that the salvage company offered, and then he would get $200,000 minus $25,000 is $175,000 from the insurance, and he would still own the boat. Now, and then he can sell it himself. Now we get to the important part of this video, because you want to buy this catamaran for that money, the $25,000. The only thing is, you will not know how much money has been offered. Although, after my examples, you can do a bit of a guess now. You have to understand that if someone's boat gets heavily damaged in a hurricane, some of those people know immediately they are not going to fix up the boat, mostly because they're retired and they do not want to do this type of work anymore, or something like that. Others actually research everything first to see if it will make sense for them to do it themselves. I have talked to boat owners who sold their boat to the salvage company, and many of them would have been very willing to sell the boat to a cruiser who's going to, continue sail their boat, take you down around the world, love their boat. But on the other hand, you, and it also counts for me as a buyer of a boat, are actually more in the way than helpful. Like, the yard is not waiting for people to come and buy hurricane damaged boats. They have enough on their hands. The salvage company is certainly not waiting for you to come, because you're taking away their business. They want to buy the boat and sell it to you for 3 to 4 times the price. I know people who came one day late. They almost outbid the salvage company by paying $30,000 instead of $25,000, and then a day later they had to buy the boat. They bought the boat from a salvage company for $80,000. And even for the owner of the boat, they are hurting. They just lost their house. They often just want to get rid of their problem. If they sell their boat for $25,000 to a salvage company, you know, they walk away and can just forget about it. However, if you're going to buy their boat, you're going to have a million questions about how things work, where things are, what spare parts are on the boat, etc. You know, just like I had to the previous owner of this boat, which some boat owners might like, and some might just prefer to just, you know, get rid of their problem. What not every, but many boat owners were interested in is to try if they could get just a little bit more money for their boat than what the salvage company offered in a really short and fast time. You know, it's still 10 or 20 grand and extra in like, you know, a week or two. Now you have to understand that you're fighting a big force. At ground zero is a company with a big bag of money, ready to pay, even though a low price, but ready to pay immediately, plus ready to do the needed paperwork immediately, and ready to release the hurting boat owner from his pain. I like to quote a sentence that one of the boat owners wrote to me after I asked them what a potential buyer you could have done to end up with their boat for approximately the salvage price. So they replied, if another cruiser would have approached us, we would have been happy to work with them. But I'd say in terms of advice, if someone is looking to do this, if they could have a broker that they already have money in escrow with for a future boat, that will really be would really be huge, would really be helpful. The fact that the contract with the salvage company was drawn up 20 minutes after we agreed on a price was a pretty efficient factor. Then any edits we requested to the contract were done immediately, which made us feel like the buyer was serious and not going to back out. So yeah, that was their advice. I hope there's any helpful. I've seen a boat owner coming there for 3 days to see if he could get $10,000 more for his $200,000 catamaran than what the salvage company offered, and at the same time to collect important things from his boat to take back home. And this guy was like almost all of the 3 days busy with like answering messages, questions from potential buyers, and many of which were honestly just quite stupid questions, like if it would be a good size boat for somebody who was 6'2". You know, don't get me wrong, these are very valid questions if you buy a boat for $300,000. But if you're looking for a cheap hurricane damaged boat, you're just not going to have the luxury to have those options. You know, when you want to buy a hurricane damaged sailboat that is in a reasonable condition, what I mean with reasonable condition is that it's okay if one keel is broken and or the mast is down, but if both keels are broken and all the bulkheads are broken and the mast is down, well, that's a bit much, you know. But in most condition, I would say you need to be okay with being 5 to 6 months in the yard working on the boat. Unless you're very experienced in doing boat work, then it would be 2 to 3 months, depending on how long it would take to ship, for example, a new mast. And for a catamaran, have about 25 to 60,000 US dollar for repairs and yard fees. You could do what was done to many of the boats here, or in Carrico, do a quick repair and then motor the boat to like a cheaper country like Martinique, or even a country like Panama, where repairs can be done cheaper, and also you might be able to find a used mast. But if you're gonna fix the boat where it is, there's no way you're gonna find a used mast. Like for an example, most of the masts are broken. Everybody needs one, and so to get a mast and a new rig in a place like that, you know, it's going to be at least immediately 30,000 you got to spend for that, you know, which brings you to the high end of repairs where you have to spend like $60,000 in total to repair your boat. The nice thing with a hurricane damaged boat is that it's generally like, it's not an abandoned boat, you know, like it was likely well maintained, loved by the previous owner, the paint jobs were done, the electronics are up to date, and that's an advantage, you know, that's all money you don't have to spend. So back to how can you buy a cheap catamaran or young monohull? You know, by far the best way is, again, the 3 steps. Number 1, be in the affected area in less than a week after hurricane happened, preferably maximum a few days after, before the salvage companies arrive. Number 2, you need about $35,000 ready to spend. Now you understand why. To move, to make fast decisions. And you need to be able to stay about 1 to 2 months in that area, you know, to look. Who should buy a hurricane damaged boat? If you are a couple who in Europe or in the USA works in an air conditioning building and each of you make $5,000 per month, that's $120,000 per year. Of course you should not buy a hurricane damaged sailboat, you know, like, because after a year or two working, you can find something where someone else did most of the work. But you know, I didn't have that luxury. Like I don't have a real skill besides making YouTube videos. So if you have money but just, you know, never enough to buy a catamaran or a newer monohull for the selling value, this can be a golden opportunity for you. But do realize that, you know, in the future when selling a boat that was damaged by a hurricane, it will be worth less than the average market price. So you buy a boat for that 10 to 20%, then you spend 30 to 60,000 US dollar in repairs and 5 to 6 months of work to end up with a boat that is worth about twice as much as the money you put in now. So it is a good consideration whether it's actually worth it for you. I would say you're spending, you know, 60 to 100,000 US dollar, depending on your experience range, to end up with like a $200,000 boat. I heard stories of the past where people would buy boats for $1, but I guess times have evolved and insurance companies have more opportunities now. And you know, I would never want to buy a boat that sank anyway for so cheap, because you know, if you're gonna have to do things like replacing all the wires, putting in new engines, and the catamaran has 2 engines and they're really not cheap, you might spend like 100,000 extra, and you think I overreact, but like a wire here, a wire there, it adds up really, really fast. The reason in the beginning not too many people were interested in buying like an older monohull was because, you know, the time and money it costs to fix it is just often not really worth it, seeing the value of the boat. Like if you have to buy a mast for 30,000 and the boat is worth 40, you know. As for arriving at a hurricane damaged area within a week after the hurricane happened, probably you don't have an immediate reason to arrive or a reason why the government would let you in. So I would say go there to offer hurricane relief services, help people build back their houses, help people get boats out of the mangroves, and in the meanwhile walk 3 times per day through the marina to see if new boat owners have come back. Like many boat owners actually come back quite shortly after hurricane just to check up on their boats, and then a few days later, before they make a final decision, leave again. And in the meanwhile, while you do own this, you know, keep walking around the boatyard to see if boat owners come back to sell the boat, and walk on the boatyard and look at damaged boats. And if there's a certain one you really like, you know, go on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Google the boat name, search the boat name, and you know, try to find the owner, send them an email or a message. Be careful who you talk to. Sometimes to me it seemed like everybody had a private agenda. Everyone was really nice, but sometimes I felt like people were nice to get information from me, and it actually felt like they were at the same time working on their own 401k plan. Like hurricane happened and suddenly everyone is like trying to make money somehow and making sure that you're not getting in their way. So I would just stick to the story that you are there to help out, and only if a real boat owner gets back, talk to them. Should you, soon after the hurricane happened, post on Facebook and on a group that is dedicated to providing cruises information for that region, not just hurricane, but just a really normal cruises information. Should you already post there that you're looking for a boat, I would say yes, as soon as possible, because there were people who did it, but quite late actually, and then I saw people commenting like, oh, it's too soon, people are hurting, you can't ask that yet. But I was on the yard and I knew that before that there were already people on the boatyard trying to sell the boat, and they just couldn't find anyone. So it would have actually been a great help to those boat owners if you are looking for a boat as soon as possible to already, you know, make known that you are looking for a boat. I'm going to end this video with saying, if you're really serious about buying a hurricane damaged catamaran or new monohull, get your budget ready and get ready to immediately jump on it after a hurricane happens. Spend a couple $1,000s of your budget on getting to the area and staying there for those first weeks, and very likely you'll become the owner of something beautiful. I really hope that this video helps some of you out there who want to buy a hurricane damaged catamaran or a monohull. And if this information helped you finding one, do buy me a beer. And I'll see you on the way on your new boat. Thank you for watching, and special thanks to all of the patrons who making these videos possible. See you next time.